Our Foreign Affairs editor, Tim Marshall, reports.
Libyan television showed the British ambassador, Sir Vincent Fien, delivering Gordon Brown's letter. One letter, but two versions of a message Downing Street had wanted to remain private. Libyan television said it was about cooperation in technical and economic relations and how to expand those relations. Then Downing Street said it was a short letter telling Tripoli to keep al-Megrahi's homecoming a low-key affair. If so, it failed. Al-Megrahi not only showed up in Colonel Gaddafi's private jet, he was accompanied by the Colonel's son. Hundreds of people were bussed in for the event. Scottish flags were provided. The crowds could have been larger, but Gaddafi had made his point, and the British government was still insulted.
I think most people looking at those pictures would find them pretty distasteful. This man was convicted of murdering 270 people in one of the worst atrocities we've seen in this country.
The Americans were also angry.
We continue to watch what they do in the days going forward about this individual and understand that the video that you saw yesterday is tremendously offensive to the survivors that, as I said, lost a loved one in 1988.
The timing of this letter will fuel the suspicions of those who believe that the government wanted al-Megrahi freed to ensure better relations between Britain and a country with huge oil reserves. Relations had warmed. Tony Blair visited Libya. A massive deal with BP to explore the oil fields followed. Gordon Brown continued the relationship. Now, opposition leader David Cameron has written to the Prime Minister noting that Libya has thanked not just the Scottish authorities, but the British government. He's demanded to know what the government has said to Libya about the affair and if Gordon Brown personally supports the decision.
Since Abdel Basset al-Megrahi was freed on Thursday, directly contradicts claims by Libyan leader Colonel Gaddafi's son, who says there was a deal linked to lucrative trade contracts. From Tripoli, Sky's Kelvin O'Shea reports.
Was it business, not compassion, which brought Abdel Basset Ali al-Megrahi home to Tripoli? The voices asking the questions and those issuing the denials are becoming louder and louder. The first real hint that al-Megrahi's release was more than compassionate came from the son of Colonel Gaddafi, who accompanied the Lockerbie bomber home from Glasgow on the Libyan leader's private jet. Saif al-Islam said the release was linked to a trade deal with Britain.
So the fact of the matter, and I say this for the first time, is that in all the trade, oil and gas deals which we have supervised, it was on the table. Whenever British interests came to Libya, we would put the release on the table, and I would personally supervise this issue.
It's a claim that has been denied vigorously by the British government.
There has been absolutely no question whatsoever, and I can say this to you categorically. No brokered deal or no agreement between the Libyan government or the British government. It's not only wrong, it's completely implausible and actually quite offensive.
24 hours after returning home, there were hugs and kisses and family photos as the Libyan leader welcomed home the Lockerbie bomber. To round off the meeting, Colonel Gaddafi gave thanks to those in Britain who he said had helped arrange the release. He gave thanks to his friend Prime Minister Brown, Queen Elizabeth II and Prince Andrew, who he claimed all contributed to encouraging the Scottish government to take its historic and courageous decision. These scenes ignored a personal request by Gordon Brown for a low-key homecoming. In a letter to Colonel Gaddafi, he said a high-profile return would cause further unnecessary pain for the families of the Lockerbie victims. It would also undermine Libya's growing international reputation. Since the meeting, Megrahi has remained in the house where he's enjoying his freedom. There is no wire fencing, just walls festooned with fairy lights and photographs. As Megrahi relaxes in his comfortable home, Libya is preparing to celebrate its 40th anniversary here in Green Square. World leaders have been invited, but will their attendance be overshadowed by Megrahi's return? As you'd expect from a country with no debt and a point to prove, The celebrations are expected to be impressive. But who will be the star guest?
Well, let's get more on that. Joey Jones is in Westminster for us this evening. Joey, whether they intended to or not, the SNP have made quite a bit of mischief for the Prime Minister.
Well, I think that plainly this whole issue and the release of Mr Al-Megrahi has stirred up a hornet's nest. That was entirely predictable, and clearly the Scottish Justice Secretary would have been well aware of that. The thing is that this whole issue, the reason that it's controversial is because the arguments are fuelled by really fiercely held passions, and I think we've seen that expressed tonight with the release of a letter from the director of the FBI, Robert Mueller, to the Scottish Justice Secretary, Kenny MacAskill. Now, one of the reasons that he has sent this letter is because he was actually in charge of the investigation which, of course, led to the conviction of Mr Al-Megrahi at the time as a Deputy Attorney General, and he is clearly, when you look at the text, absolutely spitting. He says, your action in releasing Megrahi is as inexplicable as it is detrimental to the cause of justice. Indeed, your action makes a mockery of the rule of law. You never once, he goes on, sought our opinion, preferring to keep your own counsel and hiding behind opaque references to, quote, the need for compassion. You have given, he continues, the family members of those who died continued grief and frustration. So utterly caustic stuff there, really, and obviously something that the Scottish administration may well feel the need to respond to. And I think, as I say, when you look at words like that and the fierce passions that lie behind it, it does explain why it is that this is an issue that is not necessarily going to fade quietly away. One of the other things that Peter Mandelson said in that interview that he gave on his way out of hospital this lunchtime, obviously after having had that operation yesterday, was that this issue has been resolved by the decision of the Scottish Justice Secretary. It will pass, he said. Well, there might have been an element of wishful thinking there, because yes, it will pass, but it may take a bit longer to pass than obviously the government would like, given that it is an awkward issue, a hot potato for them to deal with.
Indeed. Joey, thanks very much indeed. Now, 24 hours.